Welcome to HipMojo, show 17. I'm your host, Ashkan Karbas-Rushan.
And I'm CT Moore. And this week we're going to be talking about the power of exclusive content.
Or lack thereof.
There you go. Zuckerberg versus Page and Brin, and a whole bunch of other things in lightning round. So let's get started. So I want to ask you, Ash, do you think exclusive content can really make a difference for distributors, such as ISPs?
Yeah, I mean, if an ISP wanted to win over more users, there's an argument that could be made that if they were to get a bunch of rights to content and said, you can only get this content if you get your internet through us, will it make a difference? Maybe. I don't really think so. We've done a few deals in the past where we've given exclusive rights for like a limited period to a potential distributor, so not so much an ISP. Like in 2008, our friends over at MySpace paid us, a mid 5-digit sum. So not huge, but not nothing. So they paid us a bunch of cash for us to give them a bunch of content for 1 month before we then put it on YouTube and everywhere else. As much as it was nice, we're not, we were like a made-for-web production company, so I think our content was good and they were experimenting with it. I think where it might make a difference is with super premium content around established brands, established programming. Like if you are to get a sports event, if you are to get a music show, if you are to get, in the case of Netflix, Arrested Development, I think it might make a difference, but to me it's more marketing. I don't really, like in the States you can't even necessarily just pick whatever ISP you want, right? Like if you live in a certain area, you might not be able to get Verizon or Comcast. But let's say in a bizarro world you did, I mean, what do you think? Do you really think like if you had access to, oh my God, I'm going to get Arrested Development if I sign up with Comcast, whereas Verizon doesn't have it. Does it really make a difference?
Well, I don't think you can
tear
really
the cable out and call someone else?
I don't think you can compare like something such as Arrested Development, like that level of content, to made-for-web content. I don't know what the average Arrested Development fan, just how fanatical they are, but I can't imagine someone actually switching ISPs for access to the content, especially knowing that somewhere, somehow, some way, they'll be able to pirate it or download it somewhere else. And, I think it's an
Not that we're recommending that, of course.
Pas du tout. And I think that's the difference. And I think this is where, like, in the case of ISPs where they're making a mistake, they're like, well, television networks used to compete with content, therefore we can compete with content as well. But, the way NBC and ABC used to compete back in the days before the internet is you had to choose which one you were watching during a specific time on a specific day. You didn't have to ultimately choose between one network or the other for the rest of your life. And I think it's a really steep decision. I can't see a lot of distributors buying into it, and I really can't see it working.
Well, here's the interesting thing. Some time ago, I wrote an article saying that exclusivity was going to make a comeback. And since then, YouTube has spent $100 to $250 million to get content for 1 year before it goes elsewhere. And you've seen Netflix bring back Arrested Development. And you're going to see a lot more of this kind of exclusive content. But the dynamics have changed. I always say that content producers are like a woman, and distributors are like a man.
You're going to get in trouble again.
Yes, but hold on. This one I think makes a lot of sense. Why? Content producers want promises. They want exclusivity. They want like sweetheart deals. They want, I'm committed to you. Distributors are like, we'll sleep with anyone. Give us your content. We're not going to be selective. No guarantees. No promises. No minimum guarantees. No promises. We're going to work with your competitors and all that. So that dynamic is a bit funny, right? But what's really interesting is online, it's a lot more incestuous than that. Actually, not online, in marketing, in advertising and publishing. Why? Because it's not just a two-entity relationship. You also have to include the viewer, obviously, the belle of the ball, and the advertiser, who's like the sugar daddy that makes everything go around. What's happened, though, is instead of getting the advertiser to maybe go up to a content producer and say, we'll pay you under the guise of branded content, I do think you're seeing a new sugar daddy, so to speak, which is a distributor. I think because they control so much.
How do you really define distributor? Because in this case, one could argue the ISP's distributor.
Yeah,
in another
YouTube.
case, someone could argue YouTube. But
those are both distributors. It's basically the one that aggregates the content and then sort of has access and gets the eyeballs.
But if YouTube, for example, had a piece of exclusive content, it wouldn't be the same as. Because I wouldn't have to make a choice. It's not like I have to choose once and for all. Do I only have YouTube or do I only have Mega Video?
No, I think that's a great point, that there is a difference in terms of impact to... You see, that you raise an excellent point. I think there's a difference in terms of the impact to the viewer is different if the ISP gets access to that exclusive content. Because you might not you might not be able to watch that as a viewer. Whereas if it's the YouTube or the MySpace that gets exclusive, everybody could see it. I think the impact is either felt upon by the producer or the viewer, right? Like if you make a decision to go as a producer to YouTube, you're really foregoing, like you're getting some money, the viewer is more or less equally off, right? I just don't think it makes that much of a difference, but I do think it's going to be a big selling point. I see a lot of content producers going for this because we've seen that hyper-distribution does not work. Hyper-distribution does not work. We could literally like nuke every distribution partner we have apart from 2 or 3, and you can imagine who those are, and our business is the same. And this was a big thing where a lot of other WatchMojos failed because they were like, oh no, Ash, you're an idiot for charging licensing revenue. You should just give up your content to everyone and get all this, pennies, which will become into dimes and quarters and dollars. I got news for you. We're still talking nickels, right? So I think as a producer, you are better off to say, you know what, screw it. We're just going to do a deal with YouTube, MySpace, Crapster, get $1 million, and we're going to work with them for a year, and then we can put it elsewhere. So as a producer, it's a no-brainer. And I just think as a distributor, whether you're an ISP or an aggregator like YouTube, it's a selling point to an advertiser to say, look, you can only get this content with us. And the viewer doesn't care. I think the viewer just wants, entertainment and escapism.
I really get that, without the ISP, there's really no point of access to any kind of distributor. I'm still kind of loath to look at an ISP as a distributor. I just look at them as a service provider. I'm more in line with calling Hulu or YouTube a distributor because that makes sense. But ISPs, I know they offer access and they make distribution possible, but I refuse to see them as distributors. So yeah, I agree with you that we're probably going to see more content producers looking for more exclusivity. It makes more sense for their bottom line. It helps them rationalize what they're investing in producing this content. I couldn't see anything at the ISP level anyway really making a difference in their market by going after exclusive content. And I could actually see it killing off content producers if they tied themselves into something that's that high up the chain.
So Eric Schmidt, good segue to segment 2. Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, always said, advertising is the last bastion of unaccountability in corporate America. And this explains it, because I think this kind of exclusivity won't really make a big difference with viewers, the people who ultimately, whether, drive how much advertising should be spent around something, but you're going to see more and more of this. And the reason for that is because content producers are sort of jaded. They gave it up way too easy, too much, too quickly to the distributors early on, and they're paying the price for it. But I think that as a selling point to advertisers, those who control the ad relationships are usually the aggregators, the big distribution companies, whether it's an ad network or a YouTube. So they're going to be doing this quite a bit. For them, it's a no-brainer to sign a check, get content, procure it for sure, and then worry about monetizing it later. It's a marketing expense. I think what I also argued with Netflix going after Arrested Development, I don't necessarily, they'll probably make money, or if they'll break even. You saw DBG doing this too. DBG did a deal where they did something with Kiefer Sutherland, the Confession, I think. And they only did it with Hulu. I don't know the financials of whether they made money or not, but it was a great marketing expense. It was like, look what we're doing. We're bringing, super premium content to the web. So it's one of those things that doesn't really make sense, but you're going to see a lot more of it. And why is that a good segue to segment 2? Because when we come back, we're going to talk about who is more indispensable, the Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg or Google's co-founders Sergey Brin and Larry Page.